We're going to get started with our patient panel. I am so excited to have these beautiful women here. We're supposed to have a gentleman too, but he's a little under the weather, and so we're definitely sending our well wishes to Quentin Turner G, and we just know that you are in our thoughts and prayers. So we're going to get started. I'm so excited. There's such powerful advocates, just really making a difference in the community, women that I admire, one that I just met a couple of weeks ago, and just really excited for you to hear their stories and to glean from their journeys so far. And so I have Tracey, Chavous, Emani, McConnell-Brent, and Katrice Turner. And so we're gonna just go around and ask some questions, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end where our audience members can ask questions of the panel. So I wanna hear from each of you, just to kind of level set here to get just a overview of your journey. And so can you take us back to when you first learned about APOL1 mediated kidney disease? What did that journey to getting a definitive diagnosis look like for you? So we can start, let's start with Katrice.
All righty, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katrice Turner. I am an APOL1 variant carrier. However, my son Justin, who's in the room, my 15-year-old, was diagnosed last year with AMKD. I will say this was something that none of us had ever heard of prior to one random night in the hospital. We took him to his physician just for a checkup to see if he had strep. It had been going around his school, his 8th grade class. We get there, the doctor looked at him and said, "I'm calling the hospital, you guys should go right ahead," thinking it was PSGN, if I'm not mistaken, which is something that can happen, an acute kidney disease that could happen from strep throat. Which is what they first tried to diagnose him with. Then it was minimal change disease. And this was probably mid-February. However, my cousins and I had bought a 23andMe health kit around Christmas time because they were on sale. I had submitted, my swab. We were sitting in the hospital that night, weighing with the option of whether to give him this 8-hour intravenous medication because he had been steroid resistant, to see if it would help. And 4 o'clock that morning, my 23andMe health results came back stating that I was a APOL1 variant carrier. I literally pressed the button, called the nurse in 4 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey, I don't know what this is, I don't know what this means, but can you look into this for my son?" Seeing as though it had been 4 diagnoses at that point, none of which he was responding to the medication. So that was the first time that I had ever heard of it. And I will tell you, my husband and Justin could tell you, I sat up for the next 4 days researching in that hospital all that I could learn about the variant.
Thanks. Emani?
Well, my story started around 2020. I was 17 years old. It was my senior year of high school. We were all shut down for COVID. We were doing school online. While everybody else was excited, even though it wasn't the way we wanted, we were all excited that we were about to be done. I wasn't. I was tired. I just felt heavy, lethargic. And I ended up getting up that morning and collapsing. And I had been fighting my mom, like, "No, I don't need to go to the doctor, I'm fine. Nobody wants to deal with that." And I went, and I had stomach pain as well. They tested me, and they just told me I had an FSGS at that point. Of course, it took a while to get an actual diagnosis because it was a lot of COVID patients in the hospital. So I had been on 3 medications after that, and I wanted it to be something that people knew a lot about. And even though it's crazy to say, I kind of wanted it to be lupus because people knew more about it at that time. And I ended up not responding to any medications, and my doctor just said, "Okay, let's do genetic testing." So I did it, and I found out that I had AMKD. And most people would be sad, but I was excited because I was tired of taking medications, and one medication was pulling my hair out, and I couldn't have that. And I did research for my last senior year project. I was in the science and tech program, and at the time, doctors were telling me that it was kind of my fault because I'm I was obese, and I was doing a little bit too much on the food section of life. And I didn't want it to be my fault, so I was actually, it brought clarity to find out that I had AMKD.
Tracey.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracey Chavous. I didn't really find out about the APOL1 diagnosis, if you will, until 2 years after my transplant in 2020. I was told that I had FSGS, and there were a couple of other situations where other labels came up that I wasn't privy to in terms of what that meant for me. And I had the genetics test done, and it did show that very clearly at the top of the test that I had this mutated gene. I knew nothing about the APOL1. Actually, it seemed like the genetics counselors that I could reach out to at the company that did the exam didn't know much either. I thought that I was going to have this very lengthy, well-explained reason and a very comprehensive view and explanation of my results, but that didn't. I walked away more confused, actually. They just could tell me that that's what I had, and that both of my parents, the genes that they had mutated, and that's how I got this. It was kind of frustrating because it was after my transplant, but I still felt like I didn't have the answers that I wanted. I, too, am a researcher, so I'll dig myself a hole, go down a black hole, and find out too much, and then come out exhausted and depressed about it. But I just didn't have very many clear answers. And then I started, digging and bugging my nephrologist on my transplant team, and she helped me some. And there's some research online, but I feel like now there's more information to bring more clarity to APOL1 and what that means and how it's obtained. It definitely did point me back to my past, because I knew in elementary school that I was spilling protein in my urine because I heard my pediatrician say that to my parents. But at that time, in the 70s, it wasn't something that was very well discussed, researched. I wasn't even sent to a specialist, but I know as a kid that I kept asking my parents. I just was never satisfied with what anybody had to say. And then with some kidney advocacy groups and support groups, I started to learn more about APOL1. And then I saw something on Instagram that Sharron had posted with Kindness for Kidneys, and it just made more sense. And then even now, today at the conference, with hearing the doctor from Emani talk even more, it just brought all of the pieces together so that I could have a comprehensive conversation with my family and with my children about APOL1.
Thank you. It just brings to light to me, we're going to have multiple touch points before people start making sense of all of this. And so thank you. All of your stories bring that to light. In the beginning, you're kind of hearing information. It's like, oh, okay. But then after multiple times of hearing it different ways, it's starting to all make sense. The pieces are all coming together. Let's talk a little bit about the mental health side of all of this. I know, any diagnosis is traumatic, but how has this impacted you all mentally?
I'll say at the beginning, I was really confused. The first week of my senior year, I'm in the hospital for a week. They kept doing urinalysis after urinalysis. I don't know how much that was exhausting. And I went home thinking, well, I can't go to college? And that was heartbreaking. I wanted to go to Spelman, and they didn't give me a scholarship, but honey, I was gonna take them loans. And of course now, I know that wasn't the journey for me, but at that point, my mom just threw me into therapy. I didn't even know that I needed it. I was just sitting there. It was so much happening at one time, and I was okay, and then one day, boom, I couldn't get out the bed because I was so sad. And my life, it felt like it had been ruined. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I'm still in therapy. Of course, we're some years removed from the initial diagnosis, but certain things, like yesterday, I had a nephrology appointment. And that can bring up some emotions and some memories of like, okay, your kidneys are failing, but they're not. And the confusing aspect of everything, you still just need to check in with someone. So I would say everybody should keep a therapist for multiple reasons. But if you're dealing with something in your body, your mind is connected, of course. So, of course, get a therapist for that reason.
Absolutely. Katrice?
So for me, and this is still somewhat hard for me. So by trade, I'm an educator. I'm an educational policy advocate. My undergraduate degree was in forensic psychology, so everything in my life is about adequate planning. I have a lesson plan, I have a backwards plan, I have a SMARTY goal. So to now be sprung into this situation that, one, I could have never planned for, had no prior knowledge about, honestly and truly threw me into a whirlwind. And as parents, we see ourselves as like the project managers of your households and your family, right? And I love me a good spreadsheet with a project plan, okay? Yeah. So, with that being said, feeling light years behind the 8 ball, if you will, put me in such a negative space. I can't even begin to lie to you all and say that I wasn't. However, it then led me into, oh my gosh, like I'm just kind of the outsider looking in. How does Justin feel? Justin was at the cusp of finalizing his 8th grade year. He's supposed to be starting high school, and high school is supposed to be like the most fun. Your freshman year is supposed to be like the most exciting time for you. However, he's hospital bound, going through this transition. So what does that look like for him? And if I'm being candid, if it wasn't for him and all of his jokes and his humor, and just finding the things that makes him happy and push him forward, it's because of him and the light and the joy that he has throughout it all, that I've been able to push through. I will also be overly transparent and say, I think because I've just been constantly moving, that I haven't honestly taken the time to process. I'm out here in the community advocating for everyone else to consider their mental health. And while I am a strong advocate for therapy, everybody should get into it. I am, but it's just still so much to learn and process that the second I process one thing, there's something else that you now have to consider and process. So running after what's next has been a challenge.
Absolutely.
Can I also just add, Tracey here said that she remembers spilling protein in elementary school. That was a big part of me resenting everything. I remember spilling protein when I was 7 years old. So at the moment when I couldn't go away to college, when I was getting all this scholarship money, but I couldn't accept it from different colleges, I said, well, I don't like nobody. I'm mad. And I just had this anger because if I had known then, of course what I know now, maybe things would have been different. And maybe the onset would have still been at that time, but I would have planned better. I would have been more realistic. I didn't know how to move in life if I didn't know that fact about my life. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Wow, that's so powerful, so powerful. And, you know, it's so interesting. I'm just thinking of your story, Katrice, and you really go into survival mode. You know, as a patient, as a parent, you just go into survival mode, and you're just trying to make it from day to day, from diagnosis to diagnosis, from medication to medication, just trying to figure it all out. And you don't take that time to stop and say, wait, where am I and what's going on with me? Tracey, did you want to layer in anything about the mental aspect?
Please know that my tears are wisdom tears.
Yes. Yes.
Because that wonderful statement, like, if I knew now, you know, if I knew then what I know now, boy, oh boy. But then again, just like Sharron was saying, she feels like God chose her for this journey. I sort of feel like I did start with a lot of anger and rage, you know, but I don't think that with the knowledge that I have now, if I had it then, if I would have been able to handle it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm at such a different place. And aside from wanting like therapy or to ask. I really resented the fact that if I decided to go to therapy, which I did do, at first I was like, I really don't feel like sitting in someone else's chair and starting from the beginning. Like I really wanted somebody that knew my situation to meet me where I was. I didn't want to bring somebody along. I didn't want to have to like create these cue cards for somebody that had this onslaught of patients. So anywho, I did get some help later, but along the way, I think that the big blessing is that my village is like hardcore. Yeah. My friends, my family, the family that I created, the fact that God must have planted inside of me some seed that just made me some hardcore do or die fighter. Yes. Like I am a Leo, but aside from that, I think God knew. I think God knew, like, this girl right here is going to carry so much, but that comes with a cost too. So at the time of all of this, when things were happening, I knew things were not right, but I also knew to question authority. I was seeing a lot of specialists. I got second opinions. I got third opinions. I had an endocrinologist tell me that basically there's nothing else I can do for you. Now, I wasn't a diabetic. I didn't have high blood pressure. I did experience swelling, a lot of fatigue. I was a student athlete, just like my dad was, and he was like a community leader, so I was like that. I just had this mindset of, we're gonna solve this, we're gonna fight, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, rah, rah, rah. And I think by having that personality and that get it done mentality, I think through the years while I was going through these things with the symptoms, the swelling, I gained a lot of weight, it was like all this unexplained stuff. I feel like I just wore myself out. So by the time the real diagnosis came, I did 1 year of dialysis and then had the transplant at 4% kidney function. I was flat out beat down. And so the therapy wasn't something I could do right away. Honest to goodness, the therapy came from my caregiver, my husband, my friends, and the wonderful team at GW that I had. But since then, I have, yes, gotten into therapy. And then that's how I met Sharron, was through online support and empowerment through Kindness for Kidneys and other things. So like I said, I go through my bouts of being angry and resentful. Like here I am about to be 57, and I'm like, I was 5 and 6 and 7 years old. I remember hearing what they said. How come they weren't listening to me? Yeah. And I'm just so glad that, you have the foresight by being an educator and all that. You talk about lesson plan and plan B, C, D. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, that didn't work. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. I just really thank the fact that I have doctors now that listen to me, and I have other people that I can turn to that have had similar experiences, and then I just try to sift through everything to find the gold nuggets for myself, because this really hasn't been an easy journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just hearing you talk about that, I think we think it's going to be one thing that solves the problem, but it's multiple things. It's being around family. It's going and doing your own research when you need to. It's a lot of things that help us navigate through this. But I think the beauty in it is that we now can take our experiences to hopefully help people not start from where we started.
Right.
And we understand the importance of us being at the table. And I don't think in the beginning I understood the importance of me being on the healthcare team. I was like, oh, they're going to figure it out. They'll tell me what to do, and I just do what they tell me. But we're an important part of it. We're living it every day. And so I always encourage families, like, this is your life. And so you have to be on your medical care team. You have to be driving, the information, looking for information, getting second opinions if you need to. When we talk about precision medicine, I'm very excited about where our healthcare and companies that have drugs in development and things like that are going. When we talk about precision medicine and treating specific diseases, not just a one-size-fits-all approach, do you feel your healthcare team truly understands the nature of APOL1? And have you had to become the expert in the room?
I will start on this one. I feel like Now, don't get me wrong, our team is absolutely phenomenal. And to go back to our diagnosis journey, I will say there was one young lady who was a part of Rouse, who was a resident at the time. She was the only African American in the rounds who kept saying, maybe we should try genetic testing. Maybe we should try genetic testing. And the rest of the group were just like, no, this looks like minimal change. This looks like this. This looks like this. To find out that it was through genetic testing that we got to a formal diagnosis. Again, with me being a data nerd and researcher by heart, so many of the symptoms that Justin would experience, and even me going back and kind of tackling some of my personal health concerns, even though I'm a variant carrier, I'm like, does this play a factor into this? I've always been anemic. Would that explain why he's having some of these symptoms? Check his blood, check this, you know? And also one symptom that Justin has and still does a lot is the nausea and the vomiting. To find out, I was just in a rabbit hole one night, and he had been vomiting. We had to go to ER, and I was just like, hey, there was this one study about chronic kidney disease that I found on the internet that talked about intussusception. Can you look at his intestines? And they were like, girl, what? I said, can you look? And to come to find out, his intestine was folding into each other due to the fluid retention. So I feel like a lot of times, and they were transparent with me that some of this was newer to a lot of his healthcare team members, and regards to knowing all of the things and consequences and ramifications of AMKD, that they now allow me the space, because they like, one thing Katrice gonna do, she gonna look something up and she gonna bring it to us. Down to, I mean, we're at the point where we just have weekly check-ins. Like, hey, how's it going? Is there anything that you found this week, Katrice? Because they know I'm gonna come, they know I'm gonna bring it to them. But I'm highly appreciative of that, and that, you know, his lead nephrologist even called and asked one time, she was like, hey, I don't know if this is gonna sound kind of controversial. She's Korean. She was just like, do you want us to flip his team so that they're all persons of color, or, you know? Because one of the things that I said to them was that a lot of times people's perspective only goes as far as their experience.
Yeah.
So when you don't come from a specific lived experience, that may not be the top of your priority list, or that may not be the thing that you consider first, which I felt like was a lot of our situation. So we swapped some folks out, to be clear and candid. However, we've all worked intentionally to build a rapport. That's the nephrology team, the social workers, even down to the case managers with the insurance company, where we're all checking in and bringing our own lived experiences and research to the table to convene and plan from there.
That's so powerful. Wow. Katrice, I'm just excited. I know you're just on this journey, but there's so much that you bring to the conversation and with your story. I'm just excited about how much further we're going to go, and how you'll be able to help us in so many ways in the community. I want to switch I know we're getting close on time, and we do want to leave it open for questions from our audience, but let's talk a little bit about genetic testing. It's a deeply personal decision to go and get genetically tested. As you heard me say, I was a little nervous because I didn't know what else I was going to find out. I'm like, living with kidney disease is enough. Like, what if something else is on here, cancer or heart disease or just anything? And I didn't want to put that in my mind and have to figure that out too, or be vigilant about that. And so what factored into your decision to do the genetic testing? And what would you say to someone that's on the fence about finding out about their APOL1 status?
I would say, as I said before, I was excited. It's better to find out because it's just better to find out. Like, you just want to know. You want to know what's going on with you. I was just sitting there with scarred kidney filters. Why are my kidney filters scarred? Like, we don't know. Well, what am I supposed to do with that? And of course, like, I asked the doctor, okay, great, so how do we unscar them? And she didn't have a response. So I wanted to know. And at the time, they said, well, there's this genetic factor, but of course you don't have that. That's rare. And one thing about me is I'm rare. It's like I'm playing. But no, like, I felt like, what are the chances? Like, I feel like I would have it. And when I found out, I was happy because I had done all this research, and of course, I was so young and I was hard on myself. I didn't want it to be my fault like they had said. So I feel like it's freeing. You know the truth, and you know maybe some things you can change about your life. You want to choose kidney healthy options. You want to add some herbs to your diet that'll help you. I just went to the doctor and I got great numbers, and I'm really grateful. They're the best they've ever been. And my doctor said, well, what else have you been doing? I've been doing some herbal stuff, some oil of oregano. Sometimes we have to go back to the basics and add some things to our diet to help ourselves. So, yeah.
So good. Katrice or Tracey, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
I feel like genetic testing is important in the sense that, you know, whether you're healthy on paper or healthy looking, there's always, you know, you just have pieces. And I feel like the genetics test helps you put all those pieces together to have one final picture. I knew something was wrong. I knew something wasn't right. My father had kidney cancer when my sons were 4 years old, back in 2004. No, before that. But he had a transplant in 2004, although we did not have the same thing, per se. But he's no longer living, so I really could, when I started going through this and things just tanked, I didn't have him to be able to ask him questions or to connect dots. I asked my mom, I asked her to get in touch with his doctors. They gave me a CD of all of his results and different things, but that's like just looking at algebraic equations and calculus and just not having the foresight to put it all together. And I think that the genetics test help at least, you know, put a label on it so you can research that label to see how you can move forward in the best way possible. But at the same time, you know, it opens the door for other things. Like, so you might find out you're a carrier for something and you have children, and then they may be disposed, you know, have a higher disposition for something, and you want to be able to have that for them. When you talk about legacy, to me, that's a piece of that legacy puzzle where you can tell your children, well, I didn't have this, Dad didn't have this, but I had this test done, and here's a copy. Like, I have a copy of my genetics test attached to my will so that they will have it if something happens to me. I'm not playing games, right? And that's another reason. The other thing is, I got my genetics test 2 years after my transplant because I kept saying to my surgeon, something just is not right, because it took a long time for my kidney to get up moving. I just think it's an additional piece that you have for not just your immediate family tree, but your family legacy overall. You know, I didn't do the 23andMe, and I don't have the family tree, so to speak, where I know the village from West Africa where my ancestors originated from. I can go back to my grandmother's grandmother, but only on one side of my family. Right? And then if you're married, you're taking on your spouse's, if you have children, then that includes your spouse's genetic history as well. So I really think it's an amazing thing as a tool for just putting things together. And now I'm a grandmother. I get to be a grandmother, so that's an additional piece that I feel is important as far as legacy is concerned. Like you said, what good is it if you're sick? I'm not leaving anything else, right? So.
That's so good, and I don't think I've ever heard of anyone putting a copy of their genetic
that's
test
on my will.
results.
I'm not playing games.
That's a takeaway for me for sure, and hopefully for some of us in the room here. So I do want to leave some time for questions. We have about 10 minutes left, and so we want to open it up in the audience for anyone. There are 2 microphones on the sides there. If anyone has any questions, and I know we do have someone that's going to ask some of the virtual questions that may come in. Anyone in the audience have any questions for our panel?
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon. I have never heard of this before. I came because I was supporting my soror, my good friend. But when you keep talking about genetic testing, when I had my son in 2003, there was a genetic test that was not done. And I had my son in 2007, and they did this genetic testing that they did on all babies, especially children of color. And it was G6PD, I think that's what it is. So I had to carry a card around to let people know, you know, especially at school, that he couldn't use this, he couldn't use that, da-da-da. Why can't this be a part of that genetic testing?
So you definitely have asked the question for our next panel, but I'm sitting here looking at Dr. Moxie Bibbs in the front, who's a pediatric nephrologist. But that's a great question. And I've heard conversations about it being a part of early testing. I know with genetic tests, I feel like the pediatric world does a better job. But that's a great question that hopefully will be answered in our next session with our panelists, our experts, for sure.
I have a question for, you guys are doing a great job. Really appreciate it. Emani,
Yes, sir.
because I have two passions, students and patients. And you at that great university, go Bulldogs, Bowie State,
BSU?
and part of what we're doing is to work with HBCUs. So how did you handle this? Did people know about it? Your instructors, was there any support? So just give us some thoughts on that, and you're also helping us out as well. Thank you.
I'm not gonna get emotional. I just graduated. It was not easy. I remember my life, going to school, I have to go get my blood work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I would have to go back home, get my life together. Then I would go all the way to Bowie. That's a 30-minute drive from where I live. And I remember one class, it was my African American Studies class, my favorite class. He said, "Why are you always late? Why was this assignment late? Because you never do that." I said I was tired. He said, "Is that an excuse?" And then I just had to immediately break down and say, "This is what's happening in my life, and I know you don't have to care, but this is my life." And he said, "Well, thank you for sharing." And from that point on, I felt a relief. And that's why I encourage African-American students like me to go to HBCUs. And sure, other professors and other universities could understand, but I felt seen and I felt embraced. Okay, you have this going on and we understand, but next time you still have to email because they still have to hold you accountable. It wasn't easy. I had to live my life being transparent and I had to be vulnerable. And I found it easier that way. I still find it easier because if you act like you have it all together, nobody's gonna know. I had nothing together. And sometimes that 11:59 came and I just cried. And I had to ask for an extension. But here I am, I graduated summa cum laude from Bowie State University. And I don't want anybody else to hold themselves to this standard because at some sections in my life, it was unhealthy how hard I pushed myself. And I don't recommend it for everyone. But I did it because when little people ask me if they can do the thing, I want them to know that they can do it. So, thank you for asking.
And if I can quickly add to that, like Emani, my first interaction with you via Zoom, I was just like, this is one of the most bad, you know what, young ladies I have ever met, and just gave me some hope and inspiration as I think about my own child. Again, one of the things that I do is I live in the advocacy space to help write and push legislation, and because of stories like yours, is one of the main things that I'm advocating for now, to make sure that secondary and post-secondary students understand their rights in this predicament to go to those colleges and universities and say, before you leave your high school, I need a 504 plan. I need to walk in here with special education services. And I know a lot of times people don't equate medical diagnoses to special education services, but you all have the right to walk into those colleges and universities and every single one of those professors to know as much as you want them to know or as little as you want them to know. But what they better know is that you have this sheet of accommodations that everybody is supposed to follow.
Yes.
So I want this entire room to know and help young persons or young adults who are matriculating through the school system to understand that those rights are available to them. And as caretakers, I'm even learning in my research to, push for you all in your predicaments that I too can get a 504 plan as a caretaker of someone with chronic medical disease.
And I had
know that.
I went through disability support services, and not every professor there was I don't want to make it seem like it was peachy keen, because some of them came with a little bite, and I had to come with a little bark. Because you're going to grade this paper, right, Bulldog? But we're allowed, as people with chronic diseases or just any physical disability or not physical disability, we're allowed to do great things. So, yeah.
But very quickly, end-stage renal disease, which really this all falls under, is a disability. So it's also a series of emotions, especially if you're prideful, right? You're like, disability, what does that mean? So as being in education, I had to sit down and talk to my administrator about what I was going through, because there were some accommodations that I needed to get through my day teaching 7- and 8-year-olds. At the time, I was a second grade teacher, and I was in the portable, so I was in the back of the building. When I was on dialysis at home, I did PD dialysis for 1 year. Well, dialysis made me extremely sick and nauseous or bubble guts, whatever. And so any given time when I would disconnect, I did not know if I was going to be like in the bathroom for a longer period of time, or when I got to work, thank God my commute was 4.5 miles, but nonetheless, I had to come up with a 504 plan type of accommodation to put things and people in my building in place in case I was having issues. So if I knew I was going to be running late because I was throwing up or whatever, I had a paraeducator who was placed in my classroom to let my students in, and then I also had the same wonderful paraeducator for if toward the end of the day or any point of the day I was sick on my stomach and needed to go into the building to use the bathroom or whatever, she came running to my classroom. And I also had to train my students how to react or respond if I was sick or what would happen. We have fire drills and active shooter drills and all kinds of things. Well, then they had to have a Mrs. Chavous drill. So then we had to talk about that and what to expect. No, and it gave them some empowerment and some accountability. And students were assigned certain things if they saw Mrs. Chavous having an episode or whatever. And my students who needed a lot of extra love because of poor choices and things like that, they got themselves straightened in line if they saw that I needed something. So it takes everyone, whether you're a student in college, whether you're a mother, whether you're an employee. If they don't know, they won't understand.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say that my mama, that's a mama. She's not a mom. I call her mommy, but that is, she went up to that college and said, hey, I don't know what y'all thought y'all was doing, but y'all can get sued, right? So grade that girl papers and get her what she needs. So I appreciate my mom because, and my brothers, my family, everything. So I just wanted to shout them out.
It takes a village. It takes a village. So we have about 2 minutes left. We're going to take one question here and one question here.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Erica Poe. I am a part of JT's Cadence. That's my godson. And learning about this has been impactful for all of us, for his community, for him. And one thing that I want to know, you all have talked about how, sometimes you got to ask the right questions, so you got to ask different questions. I would like to know from your point of view in this perspective, what is a question that should be added to the facts or the frequently asked questions when folks are beginning to go through that's not normally there?
I will say, as it comes to AMKD specifically, one of the things that I wish I understood more going into just different levels in blood work and lab work. For instance, checking your protein levels in your urine, checking your creatinine. Like if you see creatinine looking a little funny and spiking, ask those questions. If you see your hemoglobin, your red blood cells looking a little funny, though I would say those are the things to go into, especially if you've had any symptoms or any previous episodes that may have been kidney related. Next time you go in for lab work, I would say to consider those things. Or if you are now in a space where you have heard of someone in your family that may be a variant carrier or has AMKD, to explicitly go to your physician to say, moving forward, when we do lab work, can we isolate these things?
That's great. That's great. And sometimes we underestimate fatigue. You know, we're just like, oh, I've been running around. And then so fatigue is another one. If you know that you're feeling unusually tired, like, it's like we need to do a little bit more digging
And
here. This isn't my norm.
Please check your teenagers. Like, I just thought that I was a lazy teenager. No, if that baby can't get up off that couch,
Yeah.
it's the issue.
Yes.
No, that's real, because Justin just thought that, you know, his little bit of weight gain and the fatigue was just, oh, well, puberty, I'm 13 going on 14, this is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It was not what was supposed to happen.
Yes. Last question.
Okay, last question. I want to thank you, thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories. You know, the idea is that some of you have transplants, if I understand. So living with transplants, congratulations on your transplant. We honor our donors and donor families. So without our donors, none of this can happen. So I want to congratulate you on receiving your transplant. As a 3-time transplant recipient, I often worry when I go to the doctor to see what my blood work is, the creatinine, eGFR. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what is your feelings about when you go to the doctor and you have that blood work? Is it similar to what I'm going through?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
I'm excited about going to get my labs done. I choose to go to my transplant center because they have become like family. So it's like a little mini reunion for me, but it's also motivating for me. I get dressed up. I take myself to my favorite little cafe afterwards. It's a little ritual that I have. I bring my journal and I write my feelings down. Everybody at the cafe knows me. We take selfies. Of course I get nervous because any slight variation in your blood lab usually means something, or it means nothing at all. It's just like you're human and it goes up, it might go down. I tend to take my labs very personally, so if something's not right, I'm beating up on myself. If my GFR is higher, I am like, oh yeah, you know, I'm excited. But what you're feeling is not unusual, especially in that you are a 3-time transplant warrior. Congratulations.
Well, yeah.
You're
Well,
still
thank
here.
you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I get worried. Yeah, you're human and try not to beat up on yourself. You know good and well what the ranges are, and you know that if you're touching those ranges that something might be off. But you know, the fact that you get your blood work done regularly is another act of self-care. You're taking care of yourself, keep a positive attitude, eat well. I went into transplant at 4% kidney function. My GFR right now is 80.
Wow.
Yes, 80.
Awesome.
So I'm saying it goes up and down. It can go 60, it could be 70, 75. It's still something to celebrate. Don't beat up on yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
But yeah, I get nervous, but I just celebrate it. It just gives me the motivation to always do better. I'm always trying to beat my time. You know what I mean? I'm trying to always beat my numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you
That's
for that.
awesome. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank our panelists today. I admire each one of you. And just thank you for your time and your expertise, and just continue to be great. Just really excited about your journeys and how you're impacting the community. Great.
Thank you.